right? Wasn't there a story with the bog bodies where somebody came out? I know that's a contentious point of contention for you, the bog bodies,
It's
but
it's not that bad. It's one of the problems that archaeologists and historians and scientists in large run into is that we sometimes have to break the bad news to people.
yeah,
And sometimes the archaeological or the historical or the scientific record just doesn't back up what people might want it to say. And so, there are always certain stories that are very popular. The tattooed Vikings is a very popular story. Um,
right.
but, in practice, our modern enthusiasm for the idea of tattooed Vikings is wildly more like is wildly more visceral, visual, maybe, than
Right.
the actual evidence that supports that. The
Sure.
entire historical evidence to support that idea comes down to one passage in one report written by one guy from Baghdad who
Mm,
happened to be way up the Volga River in Russia in like the 15th century. And
right.
that from that one sentence, you get this entire then idea. And so, yeah, the bog bodies are a great example of that. There's some good memes floating around the internet about, tattooed bog bodies and things like this. And um,
Right.
it turns out that the the bog bodies that have been investigated, none of them have been shown to be tattooed. There's one early study that purported to know of several hundred tattooed bog bodies from all around Europe. And as best as we can tell, that the academic who wrote that completely made it up.
Wow.
All of that information was falsified. None of the original records have ever been able to be
Wow.
relocated, and there's no direct physical data to confirm it. And
Wow.
so, yeah, it's just not there, right? That's the bad news.
Right.
The
Yeah.
good news
And
is yeah, go ahead.
oh, sorry, just to add on the bog, like just to add to that, is the bog usually, if there were tattoos, that's a great preservative, right? If it were in a bog, or would that still not,
We
would
don't
that take
know.
away from them?
Yeah,
Yeah.
we don't know. That's a great point.
Yeah.
Bogs preserve because of the lack of oxygen, but also
Mhm.
because of the elements, the chemicals that are in that water.
Mm.
And so as those things seep into the skin, they're basically tanning the hide.
Mm.
And so we don't know if that process would allow tattoos to survive in a way that we could see them today, even using these tricks that we have, even using,
Right.
infrared illumination or, de-stretch or these other things that we've developed to see otherwise invisible ancient tattoos. We just
Right.
don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, because I'm sure, there are as many ways of tattooing around the world, obviously, as there are people and reasons. So, who knows what inks and stuff were used that maybe a bog would get rid of more easily, or
Yeah,
whatever. Yeah.
cross-culturally, we're pretty sure that most ancient tattooing was done with carbon.
Okay.
There's very little evidence for color pigment tattoos in the past, up until really the historical era, that the
Yeah.
first red pigment seemed to be introduced. But if you go into the deep past, most of it seems to be either, excuse me, carbon, so like soot or charcoal mixed with, fluids and waters,
Mm.
or in some cases, earth pigment. So, magnetite or hematite or iron oxide. But
Okay.
yeah, you're exactly right. Like you take a skin that's been tattooed with any of those things and you soak it in the tannic acids of a bog for, let's say, 1,000 years. And
Right.
and what happens? And there's unfortunately no way for us to test that scientifically. We've
Right.
done we've done some objectively weird things with this study, with tattooing ourselves and looking at the way these things work, but we have not yet figured out a way to encase one of our buddies in ice for 5,000 years or sink them in a bog for a century and see what happens on the other side.
Right. The next scientific,
That's
donation to science. Yeah.
right. That's right. Science can have my body, but only if they put it in a glacier.
You're
Yeah,
right. See what happens to all my tattoos in a couple thousand
that's
years.
right.
That's so